Hi there, and welcome to a very different episode of The Breakdown than what we had originally planned. A couple of weeks ago, when we were in the process of putting together what we thought would be our next episode, we actually had plans to make a big deal of going back to the empty field where the North Calgary High School is supposed to be built, after hearing that there were going to be significant delays in construction from what had been promised by the various UCP MLAs and ministers who came to North Calgary to make the announcement that the construction of the high school had been funded. We had a whole bit figured out. We had some pretty good jokes despite the news of the delay, but like the rest of the world, our plans were drastically changed as the reality of the new normal under COVID-19 began to reveal itself. So we've spent a couple of weeks trying to figure out the best way to go forward with the breakdown. We're still fully committed to keeping this thing going, but it has required some changes. For example, I'm obviously not in the field at the high school site. There's no question that it wouldn't be responsible of us to go out in public and try to film our silly little show when everyone is being told by health authorities to stay at home, and with very good reason. So we've undergone a bit of a learning curve and had to do a bit of retooling here. For those of you that are used to listening to the audio version of the breakdown, you probably won't notice a whole lot in the way of changes. But for those of you that watch the video version of what we do, you'll definitely see how some things have had to change. For example, I'm sitting in front of a white background. I'm actually filming this in my basement. In fact, everyone on the show is working on what they work on from their homes as well, so it's taken a little while for our merry little troupe to put everything together in order to bring you something that might resemble an episode of The Breakdown, but we think we're pretty close to it now, so we're going to go ahead and give it a go and see what happens. So with all of that said, it's time for The Breakdown. Even though it's not exactly our normal topic area, the first thing that we wanted to break down on this episode is the thing that has caused so much change in so many people's lives over the last several weeks, and that thing is called COVID-19. And we're going to call it COVID-19 because unfortunately one of the challenges that we're facing in regards to the response to COVID-19 is the fact that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the virus that is COVID-19, and that has created a frankly dangerous amount of misinformation. The global pandemic caused by COVID-19 is actually a pretty hard topic to try to break down, and a big part of that comes from the fact that this is a disease that we're very much learning about as we go. The reality is that the information that exists around COVID-19 is actually quite limited, and what information we do have is being discovered by scientists and researchers and medical professionals as they are dealing with this virus hands-on. But there are a few things that definitely deserve some clarification because, as is the case with any sort of major event, there's no shortage of people who come forward with really bad ideas and circulate really dangerous information. In particular, when we're talking about people who have access to some sort of platform, whether it's the internet, broadcast media, or even government office, these people in these positions, when they start to spread bad information, it can spread like wildfire, and that can turn into a real problem. So today, what we want to try to do is provide a little bit of clarity on some of these topics, because the reality is a lot of people have stepped forward and spread bad and dangerous information. Whether we're talking about a radio host here in Alberta who stepped forward and tweeted inaccurate information about cures for COVID-19 based on sources that no one should take seriously, religious groups who say that through the power of faith they can destroy the virus on a global scale, or even the President of the United States making at best preliminary, if not entirely questionable claims about the efficacy of potential treatment methods, and those claims resulting in actual deaths because of the faith that people put in him and his office. To be clear, it's a perfectly normal reaction for people who've been exposed to a stressful situation for them to try to make sense of it, and by doing so give themselves something of a sense of control over that situation. The problem comes in when somebody presents bad information to those people that are looking for that sense of control, and it can be very, very hard to walk that bad information back when that happens. And that's why having as accurate an understanding as possible as to what's going on with COVID-19 is so important. So to start with, we want to talk about one of the big sources of confusion that we've seen surrounding COVID-19, and that is the fact that it seems to have two names. One of the terms that we've heard a lot of people throw around when talking about COVID-19 is coronavirus, and that's technically correct, but it's really important to understand that saying the word coronavirus is an extremely broad term. Saying coronavirus is kind of like saying America. It's a big country, it's full of a lot of different and unique people, a lot of different states, and while they are all Americans, they're all very different individuals. When we say coronavirus, we're actually referring to a family of virus types. And there's a bunch of different virus types that exist underneath the family of coronavirus. So, for example, another well-known coronavirus is SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, which also caused a global outbreak, albeit on a bit of a smaller scale, back in 2003. The most famous form of coronavirus, though, is the common cold. So depending on what specific virus we're talking about that is a coronavirus, we can be talking about viruses that don't affect humans at all, are relatively benign, or we can be talking about viruses that cause the kind of loss of human life that we're seeing with COVID-19. So, going back to the American analogy, there are plenty of Americans who are wonderful people who don't want to hurt anyone, and then there are other Americans who seem to do a lot more harm than good. So that's the distinction between coronavirus and COVID-19. When we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about a very specific virus, and when we're talking about coronavirus, we're talking about a broad type of virus. This is really important to understand because people not understanding that distinction has led to a lot of confusion, and unfortunately, there have been people who identify as working in healthcare who have stepped forward with their own misinformed theories, like this guy, who's apparently the good chiropractor. He made a video that, ironically enough, went viral. And here's some of the claims that he made in this video.
Let's talk about what's really going on.
80 degrees kills the virus? I'm like, I haven't really heard of a virus that weak. Just drinking hot water can kill it. Drinking water without ice. It can only live on your hands 5 to 10 minutes. On metal it lasts longer, but it doesn't cause a sneeze, and there is a patent on it. It's patent US 200-625-7852, a US patent on the coronavirus. And there's a European patent on a coronavirus vaccine. European patent EP 317231-9B1. That was applied for in 2014, and what do you know? It was just granted in November of 2019. I'm feeling like they're going to shut down all the schools, and this is a big pharmaceutical play to all of a sudden they're going to say, here comes the savior with the vaccine, and they're going to swoop in, and then in order for your kids to be able to go back to school, they're going to have to get this coronavirus vaccine that they just all of a sudden came up with 6 years ago.
So there's a whole lot to unpack, but unfortunately, because this person is presenting himself as a healthcare professional and he's using the social media platform that's tied to his healthcare business, he's able to propagate a lot of false information and jump to some incredibly inaccurate conclusions. So we kind of want to just take a look at a few of those claims and just break them down a little bit. First of all, his statements about the various survival times on surfaces are simply not accurate, as the virus can live for much longer than what he's describing there. From an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, scientists found that COVID-19 was detectable in aerosols for up to 3 hours, up to 4 hours on copper, up to 24 hours on cardboard, and up to 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel. And when you think about the kinds of surfaces that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, that's important information to get right. But it's also important to realize that's not atypical for viruses. One of the most common ways that people catch viruses are actually through the spread of droplets. This is one of the reasons why the droplet precautions that we've heard so much about with the masks and the eye protection and the hand washing is so important, and why these issues keep coming up. We're going to get into a bit more of that later. For our next point, though, I would like to welcome our senior correspondent from home correspondent, Aaliyah Coleman.
All right, so here's the first myth. Drinking water above 80 degrees Celsius will kill the virus. Technically, yeah. There is evidence that the virus can't survive higher temperatures such as about 80 degrees. But there is way more evidence to suggest that neither can you. Even if we ignore the fact of the amount that you would be burning yourself from the sheer amount of liquid you would have to consume for it still to be at 80 degrees passing through your digestive tract. Let's not even think about that. We have to consider that COVID-19 is largely a respiratory virus. So if you actually were trying to kill the virus at its root, right at the root, you would have to get that water inside your lungs, which, getting water inside your lungs at best is a very uncomfortable situation, let alone when it's near boiling. But getting that water inside your lungs would cause absolutely serious, if not fatal, burns. But more to the point, COVID-19 is a systemic virus, meaning it's thriving everywhere. It's not just picking one spot, it is taking root in every corner of your body. So if you actually wanted to use this myth to rid yourself of the virus, I've got some bad news for you. You have to raise your internal temperature, which is normally about 38 degrees, to 80 in order to kill the virus. And a fever starts becoming dangerous and life-threatening, causing permanent brain damage at about 42. Yeah, anything much higher would certainly cause death.
At this point, we want to point out that for a medical professional, he clearly doesn't understand the difference between a coronavirus and COVID-19, the specific type of coronavirus. This is perhaps part of the reason why he has so much confusion surrounding the patent on the coronavirus and the vaccine that he references. So the patent application that he's referring to is actually a patent application related to SARS, a type of coronavirus that caused the outbreak in 2003. And while he is right that the patent was originally filed by a company called Chiron and was eventually assigned to GlaxoSmithKline, GlaxoSmithKline actually abandoned that patent. Nobody holds that patent right now. In regards to the vaccine, while there is a European patent on a coronavirus vaccine, it's for a strain of coronavirus called avian infectious bronchitis virus. And the key word there is avian, because that particular type of coronavirus only affects birds, not people, and it's definitely not COVID-19. Saying coronavirus is kind of like saying cars. So you can say that cars were invented in the early 1880s, but that doesn't change the fact that the Tesla Cybertruck, which is also technically a car, doesn't come out until 2021 at the earliest. So just because one thing existed doesn't mean that the newest iteration of it existed as well. So while the coronavirus family and the many different strains that have been a part of that family have been around for quite some time, COVID-19 is a new strain that we've only seen in the last couple of months. So with just those two facts out of the way, it's pretty clear that his attempt to provide support for some kind of big conspiracy is more of a product than his own beliefs than it is rooted in reality.
Here's your next myth. The virus originated because Chinese people were eating bats. So the news has been absolutely obsessed with the origin story of COVID-19 since this whole thing began a few months ago. And there's theories that it's because the Chinese were eating bats, or that they ate an animal that had also eaten a bat, and that's how it made the jump to humans. But there's literally no evidence to support this that is accurate. What we do know is COVID-19 it almost certainly mutated to its current state in a bat. And we know that because of the genetic sequencing we've been able to do of the virus. But what we don't know is how it made the jump to humans, and we likely never will. There's theories, there are stories that maybe it happened, they made the jump in a food market in Wuhan, and that's how it happened, but there's also a significant amount of evidence that suggests otherwise. With the fact that the incubation period can be as little as a day to almost a week before a person starts showing symptoms, we may never know exactly when, where, or how the virus jumped to humans. And in the meantime, stop blaming the people that are being affected the most for something you don't even understand, because none of us understand it. And it's all of this is only coming from a place of fear and anger, and we want someone to blame, but blaming the victims isn't right either.
One of the other big theories out there that got a staggering amount of traffic has to do with the notion that COVID-19 doesn't even exist. And it's actually the signals from 5G wireless that is making people ill. This comes from the fact that the province in China where it's believed the virus may have originated from is also one of the areas that has a 5G network. 5G is viewed by many as the next generation of wireless technology, and there have always been people that have had concerns about the electromagnetic radiation that's involved with cellular and wireless networks. The reality is that while there are no studies that demonstrate that 5G causes any damage to human tissue, there are plenty that say it doesn't. Never mind the fact that COVID-19 has taken hold in plenty of places that don't use or even have 5G wireless infrastructure, or that we've taken pictures of COVID-19, because we have. But this has morphed into a huge array of conspiracy theories, ranging from the effects of the virus and its transmission via 5G networks to the idea that COVID-19 can use 5G networks to communicate, in which case I would love to know what their data rates are like because I still pay through the nose.
The final thing that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of miracle cures in response to COVID-19. It's completely understandable that people would want there to be a simple and accessible cure or a preventive measure that people can take in regards to COVID-19, but there's no evidence to support it. While there have been yoga studios that have claimed hot yoga can prevent the spread of COVID-19 and chiropractors have claimed that they have the cure, certain US presidents have made dangerous and unfounded claims for drugs that have actually resulted in deaths, and even religious figures who have invoked spiritual powers to destroy the virus.
In the name of Jesus.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Standing in the office of the prophet of God, I execute judgment on you, COVID-19.
Oh, Ramash.
It
No more.
is finished.
Finished.
It is over. And the United States of America is healed and well
Thank you.
again. It's dead.
It's dead. It's
dead.
done. It has ceased.
Yes.
It has ceased to exist.
Yes.
It's beginning to shrivel.
Yes.
It's beginning to draw
Yes.
up and shrivel
Yes.
and disintegrate.
Yes. At exactly 12 noon on the 29th day of March.
Let's be clear. Anyone who makes claims like the ones we just mentioned are either predatory, desperate, or ignorant, or a combination of all three. Viruses are notoriously hard to destroy, and the management of almost every virus comes down to prevention, like vaccines to safely build immunity, social distancing, and washing your hands, and managing your symptoms if and when the virus takes hold. And that's all we can do. And I know you feel powerless, but it really is just that simple.
Moving on. With the shortage of medical supplies globally, one of the items that has generated a lot of confusion and frustration is face masks. To break this one down, it's critically important that we understand a few things. First of all, there are a lot of different kinds of face masks, and they're all good for different things. Cloth masks or procedure masks are best for protecting other people from the person wearing the face mask, particularly if the person who's wearing the mask isn't necessarily showing symptoms yet. This is because it somewhat prevents droplets from leaving that person's mouth and spreading to people around them. What cloth or procedure masks don't really do a good job is protecting people who don't have the virus from it. And that's because one of the biggest ways that the virus enters the body is through mucous membranes, which means that you can breathe it in, but you can also get it in through your eyes. A face mask doesn't protect your eyes. So if you're wearing a mask but come into contact with someone who's producing droplets, the virus can still enter through the mucous membranes around your eyes. It seems like initially some health authorities didn't want people to put on face masks for protection for themselves, but as the virus progresses and we're seeing a shift from travel-based transmission to community-based transmission, it makes sense that health authorities would want to see people wearing masks so that if they're carrying the virus but not yet showing symptoms, it might help prevent the spread further. But cloth masks won't protect you from catching the virus effectively at all. N95 masks have a much higher level of protection, but health authorities agree that they're only needed when healthcare professionals are working in environments where the virus can be aerosolized. That means that they're performing procedures that can create a mist that includes the virus, most of which involve high levels of oxygen or procedures involving a patient's airway. At that point, N95 masks are still only part of a complete personal protective equipment package that should include eye protection as well as a gown. It's also worth realizing that for N95 masks to provide the protection that they're designed for, they have to be fit tested to each individual. Each person requires a mask that specifically fits their face. So, if you see someone wearing only an N95 mask or different sizes and styles of N95 mask, that's either someone who has no idea what they're doing, or they're posturing for a PR stunt and wasting important medical supplies while doing it. So this is all by way of saying that one of the best things that we can do above and beyond the preventative steps, like staying at home, washing hands, and practicing social and physical distancing, is to make sure that when we're reading information or sharing information, that information comes from reputable sources. That's why it's so critical that before you believe something that you see on Facebook or Twitter, make sure that you're comparing it with information from reputable sources. Reputable sources like Alberta Health Services or the World Health Organization or WHO. So if you see something on the internet that sounds a little bit far-fetched, there's probably a really good reason for that. So before you share anything like that, make sure that you can confirm it, because the second worst kind of pandemic that we can experience while we're trying to deal with COVID-19 is a pandemic of bad and harmful information. There's no question that the vast majority of attention people have to give when it comes to healthcare issues these days is focused on COVID-19. But while that attention has been focused there, the UCP government has been working to make some pretty major changes to our healthcare system. Now, one might argue that a pandemic might be one of the worst times to try and redesign Alberta healthcare, but nonetheless, Health Minister Tyler SHandro has been doing exactly that, and it has been nothing if not dramatic. Changes to physicians' fee schedules have been looming since the UCP were elected, but it's only in the last few weeks that things have escalated from alarming to disaster movie levels. It seems like a lot of the recent drama started up when the government rolled out its new health app, Babylon. Babylon is a health app that by its own description is a free healthcare mobile app that allows you to check symptoms, consult with doctors, and access your health records. Now, while that might sound like a good idea, it's worth noting that the app has some problems. Not only does it have a different billing structure than visits with a person's regular physician who knows them, the company has rolled it out as something of a work in progress or an ongoing evolutionary process, but that means it has some pretty serious flaws, not the least of which is an ongoing problem with the check symptoms part that chronically and consistently misdiagnoses the symptoms of a heart attack. To make matters worse, there are some very real questions about the integrity of private data within the app, as it makes clear in its own privacy policy. The terms and conditions of the Babylon app states video recording of patient visits is copied and stored on Babylon servers, and that the video may be shared with corporate partners and entities outside of Canada, including foreign governments, which should be deeply alarming to anyone thinking of using the app. In fact, while a privacy impact assessment has been submitted, the review of the privacy impact of the app has not been completed, and it could take up to a year of the app being used by Albertans before the questions of the integrity of the privacy of the app are answered. And in a twist of irony, while the UCP have railed against Canada's importing of oil from Saudi Arabia because of their poor history of human rights violations, the company that owns Babylon is largely owned by Saudi Arabia. So while the UCP don't believe that we should import Saudi oil because ethics, one can't help but wonder, given the app's privacy policy, why they believe that they should be trusted with Alberta's private health data and videos of interactions with Albertans and their physicians. Needless to say, given the app's funding model and the concerns surrounding its privacy policy, there are a lot of physicians who criticize the app as an attack on public health care. But that was just the start of things. It came out on Twitter that the Minister SHandro actually owns shares in a company that brokers private health insurance, and that his wife is actually the person who runs that company. Given the questions surrounding the perception that the UCP is attempting to dismantle the public health system, people responded strongly, and very inappropriately in some cases, with the minister's wife allegedly receiving threats, and the minister responding from his government account to emails sent to his wife's company. But then things got really weird. Well, all of this was going on. An acquaintance of the SHandros, who's also a physician and an epidemiologist, posted a meme defending public health care. The minister responded by showing up at the doctor's house and sent the doctor's kids inside so they wouldn't see what was about to happen, and then berated the physician on his driveway until the physician, in an attempt to de-escalate the situation, offered to delete the post, which he did. So to be clear, the Minister of Health, who is arguably in a significant position of authority and power over this physician, showed up at his house during private hours and demanded that he take down a private Facebook post. The kicker? He didn't apologize for doing any of it, just for causing a distraction. But that's not all. It turns out that the minister has taken to obtaining physicians' private phone numbers and calling them directly outside of normal business hours. Since then, political parties across the board have called for SHandro to resign or to be removed from his role as minister, but so far, the premier has only supported SHandro's action. But there's been, let's call it a response, from some concerned Albertans.
Will the real Ty Shandy please stand up? We're gonna have a real problem here. Y'all act like you never seen a health minister before. Jaws all on the floor like ducks when Evans burst in the door and started shutting it down worse than before. The client cuts were enforced, blowing up the general. It's the return of the, oh wait, no way, you're kidding. He didn't just say he'd lay off nurses again, did he? And Dr. Oru said, nothing, you idiots. Dr. Oru's dead, he's tweeting from a basement. Conservative women love Shandy, man. Chicka, 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 Ty Shandy, get sick with him. Look at him, walking around, emailing you know what, yelling at you know who. Yeah, it's a blind trust, though.
To note, all of this is going on while one of the UCP's core promises was to restore decorum. And that's what we've got for this episode. It's a bit shorter and certainly a bumpier ride than normal, but the good news is that we have a few bonus podcasts and episode planned over the next 2 weeks that will hopefully make up for it, because we've been trying to find our footing in all of this. There's been a whole lot that's been going on. Two of the big topics that we're looking forward to covering. First one's Bill 10, which is a bill that the UCP put through that gives them unprecedented powers of legislation during the time of the pandemic. That may or may not be a good thing, but they now have the ability to make legislation without putting it up for a debate and vote, as long as they believe and can justify that it's in the public's interest. We're going to hopefully talk to a couple of experts about what that could potentially mean while our province is trying to deal with this pandemic. The other thing that we want to talk about is the situation with homeless shelters in our province. There's been a lot of criticism leveled towards how homeless shelters are being set up. You may have seen some of the pictures that have been posted of the emergency overflow homeless shelters, where it's just a bunch of cots in convention centers. And the government's very pleased to say that those cots meet the physical distancing requirement, but one of the things that they're not telling people is they actually changed the rules for what physical distancing is for homeless people and for homeless shelters, and they made it a lot less than what it would be for just people out and about at a grocery store, which is really, really scary for homeless people, and it should be scary to all Albertans because it could potentially influence the spread of a wider pandemic. Now, in closing, usually we end our shows with a little bit of a reminder of our Patreon page and that we run on crowdfunding, but we don't want to do that this time around. Instead, we'd like to ask you to consider making a donation to a charity or a cause that you believe is worthwhile. Whether it's a cash donation to a women's shelter, a food donation to a food bank, or just helping out a neighbor who needs a little bit of help, maybe picking up their online grocery order. There's one thing that we know for sure. When we do get through this pandemic, and we will, it will be because even though we followed the recommendations of health authorities and we practiced social and physical distancing, we did all of this together. So thanks for your patience and sticking around, and as long as we can charge the batteries, we'll be here too. And with that, we're going to let Ty Shandy by Negotiate play us out this week.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Will the real Ty Shandy please stand up? I repeat, will the real Ty Shandy please stand up? We're gonna have a real problem here. Y'all act like you never seen a health minister before. Jaws all on the floor like ducks when Evans burst in the door and started shutting it down worse than before. The client cuts were enforced, blowing up the general. It's the return of the, oh wait, no way, you're kidding. He didn't just say he'd lay off nurses again, did he? And Dr. Oru said, nothing, you idiots. Dr. Oru's dead, he's tweeting from a basement. Conservative women love Shandy, man. Chicka, 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 Ty Shandy, get sick with him. Look at him walking around, emailing you know what, yelling at you know who. Yeah, it's a blind trust though. Steve Buick's probably gonna support me with the fake truth, but no worse than what's going on in the tennis boardrooms. Sometimes I wanna get on TV and just let loose, but I can't, cause they shot me down at Squirrel the Moose. My tweet is on your lips, my tweet is on your lips, and if you're lucky, you might just witness me throw a fit. Come up your driveway yelling and sending away your kids. Don't expect me not to jump and scream a little bit. Of course, the conflict of interest ignored. By the time they're elected, they got the Kenny example, don't they? We ain't nothing but bandits. Well, some of us crab gills feeling about cash stuffed in the envelopes. But if we fire nurses and smash the microscopes, then there's no reason tell us Babylon can help you cope. But if you feel like I feel, I got the antidote. Colon on my beer, bro. Sing the chorus and it goes. I'm Ty Shandy, yes, I'm the real Shandy. All you other Ty Shandys are just irritating. So whoop the real Ty Shandy, please stand up. Please stand up. Please stand up.